My name is Izzy, and this happened to me and my best friend Elise. At the time of this story, we were in the 6th grade, and in my opinion, that makes this all the more disturbing. My first period class that year was language arts. To understand part of the story, you need to understand part of the layout. You walk into the room and there's 4 clusters of desks in the shape of a circle. Each corner of the room had one. The computer board was at the front of the room. Next to that was a library corner, which had a desk cluster next to it. I sat at those desks with 4 other people. Only 2 people in my circle matter in this story. I'm no longer in touch with these people, so I'm going to be using nicknames for privacy. My friend E sat right next to me. He was a bigger person at the time and was almost always serious. H was quiet almost always and didn't really have many friends. He never really participated in the group reading what we had to do. H not reading when he was supposed to made the group upset that we had to do more work, and H was getting away with doing nothing but playing games on his Chromebook. He was getting sick of H getting away with not doing anything, so he stood up, walking over to H, grabbing his Chromebook while saying, "What are you doing on this thing anyway?" As he looked at the screen. He freaked out over something the rest of us couldn't see. I thought he would show us what was on the screen, but he didn't, until I asked what it was. I remember being annoyed that he didn't show us without one of us having to ask. That feeling of annoyance quickly disappeared when he turned the screen to face the rest of us. H had several tabs open, all of which were either pictures of human bones or human organs. I know that doesn't sound all that alarming, but as kids, you should be able to imagine how that freaked us out. The images H had on his screen wasn't what made me so scared. It was the face he was making at us. H was smiling, and not like a normal smile. He was smiling like he was planning something. Or maybe he was just freakishly proud that we saw what he'd been up to. It was really disgusting, and he looked so happy. I felt a chill when his eyes landed on me. I got extremely upset about that. I leaned forward, telling H, you need to do the work with the rest of us and stop being a creepy freak. Which now I really regret saying. It wasn't the fact that he almost immediately stopped smiling. It was that he never stopped looking at me. I was so focused on the way H was looking at me that I barely reacted to the teacher yelling at me. She apparently heard me call H a creepy freak and decided to have a talk with the group. When we were done being lectured by our teacher, H started deleting his search history. The only thing the rest of us could do was watch him do it. None of us wanted to get in trouble again. After a few more moments of us all staring at H, we started to read the book again. Elise and I didn't have any classes together until after lunch, so while we sat down at our lunch table, I then told Elise what had happened. After we talked for a while, we decided we weren't going to let that ruin our day. We were really excited because Elise was spending the night at my house after finding out her mom couldn't let her stay home alone because her little brother had to get a surgery that night. So we went about our day without thinking twice about it. Before we knew it, we were finally going to my house. We got on the school bus and we'd started talking about how our days were and what we were going to do since she was spending the night. The bus eventually pulled to our stop, and we got off and started walking towards my house. When we got inside, we had started taking off our jackets and kicking off our shoes. Another piece of information is that I had a dog. We were supposed to take him outside, but that never happened. My dog was barking in his crate downstairs, but we didn't really think anything of it, considering dogs get really excited when their owners get home. And he most likely had to use the bathroom since he'd been in his crate all day. Elise had gotten her shoes off before me and started walking down the stairs, but suddenly paused before then yelling as loud as I've ever heard her speak. "What the fuck?" She didn't move, just stood on the stairs. Since she had spoken so loudly, I freaked out and then looked in her direction. I just barely saw something outside of my dog's crate then move, but then almost immediately move out of my field of vision. Elise was definitely in shock because she only responded back with, "Get a weapon," after I asked her multiple times, "What's wrong? What did you see?" as I too started to freak out. I listened to her, but I stupidly chose the worst makeshift weapon you could possibly choose. Somehow in my mind, I thought that a pillow would make a great weapon. Yes, a fucking pillow. Luckily, Elise was a lot smarter than I and grabbed the biggest kitchen knife we had and charged downstairs. I didn't know what we were looking for because Elise didn't tell me. There wasn't a single place that we didn't check. Whatever we were looking for wasn't in the house. We were both really relieved though when we didn't find what freaked Elise out, but I soon figured out why she was so scared when she then told me. I looked down there and there's someone sitting or maybe laying on the floor messing with one of your dog's toys. Elise saying that made me lose any form of calm that was left in me. When my parents came home, I don't believe we told them what happened, but if we did, I don't think they'd believe us. And as if the story couldn't get any worse, the next day at school when I walked into homeroom, H walked up to me and says, "Hey you, I thought I should let you know that I really enjoy crawling around in your basement. Yeah, it's a lot of fun," and then calmly walks away. So yeah, somehow my creepy ass classmate broke into my house and was just chilling in my basement. I don't know why or what he was really doing in my house, but I really hope he doesn't come back, because my dog isn't a scared little puppy anymore, and he'll really fuck you up if he has to. Sometimes you need a bit of fun in your life, and certain people can definitely make it brighter. I'm talking about friends. Close friends. This story's been in the back of my mind for about 2 years now, and it's one of the most terrifying experiences of my entire life that I really want to forget. It occasionally pops into my mind, and it still gives me the shivers to this day. It was the end of another school week, a Friday, and as a lot of us teenagers do, we decided to have a sleepover on the weekend. My friends agreed with me, and we happily walked home, talking about what we should do the next day and where we should go, and all that stuff that you'd expect to talk about. One of my other friends said that we should have a sleepover at his place. I'm not revealing their real names for privacy reasons, so for this story I'll call them X and L. And in case you're confused, it was X that said he wanted us to sleep over at his place. I quietly walked home as I and L split up to go to our own houses to pack up our belongings for the sleepover. I grabbed out my bathroom equipment, sleeping bag, and fresh clothes, and all the other stuff you would need for a sleepover. Once I was finished packing my bag, I had called both X and L on our group chat, and told X that I had packed and I'd asked my parents if I was allowed to come, and told them they said yes, and L said the same thing as me. We were all excited, and X said that he'll be waiting at the park down outside his house to meet, since the park was only 2 houses down from his place. I casually walked to the park, which was approximately 10 minutes away. Right as we got there, I saw X and L already at the park. I gave them both a wave and we all walked to X's house. We all got inside and made ourselves comfortable with our sleeping bags in the living room, because X's room was, well, a tad bit tiny. I think that the time was somewhere around 12:30 a.m. I remember it raining ever so slightly. We were all laughing and giggling about certain events that had happened at school that day, but I guess that isn't really relevant to the story. I told them that we should probably all go to sleep since it was extremely late and that I was really tired. Elle then replied, "Alright then, I guess it is a pretty shitty night after all." We had all started laughing at that response, and it eventually got to the point where we started talking less and less, and then eventually falling asleep from boredom. However, I didn't really fall asleep that night. I was rolling over in my bag and just trying to get into a comfortable position to sleep in, but had no luck falling asleep. I had my eyes wide open, staring at the blank ceiling. I looked at both X and L, who were both pretty wiped out into slumber. I got out of my sleeping bag as quietly as I possibly could, and then went into the kitchen to get a drink. But after I had my drink of water, I had heard some type of noise coming from a wall. I didn't really make it out at first, and I kinda had a difficult time trying to figure out what it was, and it was coming from the living room. I carefully went into the living room and then tried my best not to step on Elle. I was standing in the middle of the room trying my best to find out where the hell the sound was coming from. Okay, to give you a bit of context, if you enter the front door of the house, the living room is in the first room that you enter, and the left side of the living room where you enter is a giant window. Well, the tapping sound was coming from that window. My heart was starting to speed up now, but what was the only logical option, you may ask? To look through the window. I told myself to just go up to the window and see what it was, so I proceeded to do so. I stopped. There was something else. The windows were closed by blinds. I leaned my ear closer to the window. Now, along with the tapping, I could also hear breathing. I could barely just hear it over the rain. Very slow breathing. I couldn't say anything. I very slowly backed away from the window. I frantically woke up both X and L in a panic. They both said to me, "What? What is it?" in a grainy, tired voice. I told them to shush themselves and to listen. However, the tapping and breathing soon stopped. Elle then said, "Dude, I don't hear a thing." I told them what I heard, but they didn't believe me. I was getting mad. But then Elle suggested, "Why don't you just go outside and check?" I immediately said something along the lines of, "Fine, I'll go out there. In fact, why don't you both come out with me just to be sure?" I opened the door quietly and motioned my friends to come outside with me. We got to the window outside the house, and nothing. There was nothing there. X said to me, "I told you, I knew there wasn't going to be anything there." We both talked about it for a bit outside, and X said I was crazy, but the story doesn't end there. Out of the blue, Elle nervously said, "Wait, who's that guy over there?" We all looked, and there was a dark silhouette that was just standing still a few houses down the street. He was probably about 5'5", and he was wearing a raincoat from what I remember. My friends both looked at me, knowing that I wasn't crazy. The guy was just staring at us, not moving a muscle, but he then started laughing in a sort of sinister kind of way. Within that moment, I said softly, "Go for the backyard gate, right now, do it." The guy continued to stare at us while we both slid slowly to the gate, which was very close. Suddenly the guy just full-on sprinted right toward us without warning. My life was in slow motion. I dashed for the gate. All of us got in, and I was actually the last one to get in, and then I locked the gate. The guy ran into the gate with such force, but the gate didn't budge. The gate and fence were really high, and he couldn't possibly get over it. He then started banging and screaming at the gate, yelling things like, "Come on out here and I'll kill you, you dumb teenagers." And I'll honestly never forget that sentence. We made a run for it to the back door of the house and woke X's dad up. He bolted straight outside and said the guy made a run for it and was already halfway down the street. He chased after him, screaming for him to get back here. X's dad called the police straight away. They arrived a little while later with cops. 3 searched the area while 1 stopped to talk to me about it. The 3 cops found nothing except for a long and sharp kitchen knife that was dropped outside the front lawn. I shuddered. One of the policemen asked me if I knew what he looked like, but I couldn't make anything out other than he was somewhere around 5'5" and wearing a raincoat. He wasn't seen again after that, and he hasn't come back. But the police that day said they found dirty boot marks right outside the front door. But the really creepy part about the boot marks outside the door is that apparently that door had a peephole, and that peephole could make you see through both ways. Plus X's house is old, and that guy was possibly spying on us through it. Moral of the story is be very careful during the night, because anything can happen if you're not careful.
So, back when I was a kid, me and my best bud were having a sleepover. His mom and dad had gotten a divorce a couple months prior, so to counter all the stress of it, he pretty much got whatever he wanted. Not like his mom was spoiling him or anything, she was just being super nice to make sure he wasn't too bummed about his dad leaving. Did it work? yes and no. Getting to have his friends sleep over, getting an Xbox, a cell phone, and getting much more personal freedom was all well and good, but every so often you could tell the whole thing was getting to him. The good thing was, I got to spend a whole bunch more time with him to give him the support we needed, which coincidentally meant that I was there for one of the worst moments of his childhood. Actually, make that both our childhoods. So, we're having a sleepover, and his mom is having a friend over. We're upstairs, they're downstairs. At one point, I wanted a glass of water, so I head downstairs, but he had to walk through the TV room to get to the kitchen, and when I do, I see my buddy's mom's friend is a dude, and they're getting kinda close, if you know what I'm saying. They jump off each other when I walk into the room. I walk through like, don't mind me, and it's incredibly awkward as I walk back through with my glass of water. Then, I make the mistake of mentioning it to my buddy. He's clearly not happy with the fact that it's a dude. Like, we're 9th graders at this point, so we're pretty savvy to, you know. Anyway, my buddy isn't happy, but he just does his usual thing of internalizing it before distracting himself. Not the best coping mechanism in hindsight, but it is what it is. Then, remember that cell phone I mentioned? Well, his mom bought it for him so he could keep in touch with his dad, which he then does. And guess what's the first thing he tells him? Yep, that there's a strange dude over at his house. I totally blame myself in the moment. It sucked so hard, and when my buddy hung up, turned to me with a smug grin and said, "Dad's on his way over." I just knew something bad was going to happen. I kind of wanted to leave, but at the same time, my whole reason for being at that time was being a good friend to Ryan. I had a really healthy family life at home. Like, my mom and dad were a loving, dedicated couple, right up until the day my dad passed. And I'd like to think they raised good kids. But Ryan, his parents were total morons. And good God, did that make me feel guilty. So, I stuck around. I knew something horrible was going to happen, but I had zero freaking clue to how bad it would really be. My buddy's bedroom window overlooked his driveway, so when his dad finally did show up, we could see and hear almost everything that went on down there. His dad, and I'm not embellishing here, hurtles up the driveway at like 40 miles an hour, screeches to a stop, and then doesn't even shut his door when he climbed out of his car. Ryan is watching him, looking at him like his dad is a knight in shining armor for a few seconds, right up until he says, "Oh crap, I think my dad has a gun." Hearing that final word sent this razor-sharp icicle running right through my guts. I knew there'd probably be shouting and fighting, but shooting? Then all we hear through an open window is, "Where is he?" It was Ryan's dad. He'd banged on the door until his mom answered, and then demanded to know where her guy friend was. Ryan's mom's all like, "I don't know what you're talking about." But then Ryan's dad goes from 0 to 100 in a second flat. "Don't lie to me, Linda, where is he?" he says. There's this very real, palpable pause, and me and Ryan are just on this very tense, nervous feeling. Then his mom says, "Who told you?" Again, shiver of ice through my stomach, because I'm basically the one who told, and in that moment, I told myself that whatever was about to happen was completely my fault. "See?" Ryan's dad exploded at the admission. "You're a freaking liar, Linda. Now get out of my way." We could hear Ryan's mom screaming for a second. Then we heard another voice, only this one is definitely inside the house. The guy friend. "Get off!" he screamed. You heard the guy start to shout something at Ryan's dad. Then he just went totally silent, and all you could hear were feet beating against the floorboards downstairs. All before, bam, bam, bam. 3 distinct gunshots that echoed around the house. Me and Ryan are just bawling at this point, because we could still hear his mom screaming, and we had no idea if she'd been shot, if the boyfriend was dead, if the boyfriend had a gun and fired at Ryan's dad. The whole situation was traumatic enough, but the not knowing, man, That was just the worst. I had to grab Ryan's cell phone off of him to call 911. He just totally shut down from the stress. He'd had a rough enough few months while the whole divorce thing went on, then now he had to deal with potentially a dead mom or dad. I don't blame him, honestly. It was bad enough for me, and it wasn't even any of my parents. The 3 shots were all heard, and before the cops showed up, the only sounds we could hear were Ryan's mom crying downstairs. We should have gone to check on her. I know we should have, but the dispatcher told us both to stay put because we didn't know if there was still an active shooter or whatever, so we did as we were told. Thankfully, everyone turned out to be okay and no one was even shot. Ryan's dad had aimed the gun at his mom's friend as soon as he'd laid eyes on him, but the guy was quick and just bolted out the back of the house as Ryan's dad pursued. He fired 3 shots, but it was basically just to scare the guy away at that point, and I heard none of the bullets even went near him. But still, it was terrifying, and Ryan's dad ended up going back to prison for a long while because of it.